Most of you know me. My name's Paul Klenner. I reside in New Plymouth, and I'm the Look Good, Feel Better facilitator for this class this evening for men. So on behalf of Look Good, Feel Better, it's my pleasure to welcome you along to what they call Feel Stronger and Live Better online Zoom class. A special welcome to all of you who are joining for the first time, and welcome back to those who are rejoining. It's kind of pretty cool. Tonight's our first class for 2024, and already we're into March. Boy, the year is racing. And welcome, Jeremy. So it's great to have you along, and I'm going to be introducing Jeremy shortly. I'm just going to cover off a little bit about Look Good, Feel Better. I know some of you have heard this before, but some of you hasn't. So remember that these classes aren't a one-off attendance. You can actually join any Look Good, Feel Better class at any time you want. There's online Q&As for men and women, and there's classes for just men as well. And really, Look Good, Feel Better work really hard to get speakers of Jeremy's calibre and others around the country to cover off on a whole range of different topics, to just be able to provide some add value to each of us and to add to our things that might help us improve what we do daily, living with or surviving with or having got through cancer. So I'm going to just for the evening, I'll just finish off with some things around Look Good, Feel Better. I'll introduce Jeremy. Jeremy's going to have the rest of the session essentially to talk to us. If you feel like asking Jeremy a question as we go, please do. You'll probably think of something, and if you don't want to interrupt, just write it down, because we kind of want this to be a bit of a Q&A. So like whilst he'll be talking, there'll be things that you might be prompted to ask. So please ask. But if in case no one does, at the end of when Jeremy talks, we're going to open it up anyway to have some question time and answer time. So please make the most of Jeremy's experiences for yourselves. So a little bit about Look Good, Feel Better. Some of you may know about it. It's a sponsored organisation throughout New Zealand. It provides free courses, products, and all sorts of things to men and women throughout the country. They're really known for their support of women, especially with wigs and makeup and those sorts of things, right? That we face. That we have hair loss, we have skin changes, we go through stress. There's all sorts of appearance-related side effects that people get from cancer, especially when you're going through your treatment. So Look Good, Feel Better provides a lot of support in that area. It can be better understood. You may have got a little booklet in your package. Feeling Stronger, Live Better. That probably explains Look Good, Feel Better and what the material that they have. And of course, we all know that through whatever we do, be it products or exercise or, as we've heard before, and walking with groups, that it helps us physically and emotionally, and feeling better just kind of helps us be able to get through daily life a whole lot better. So managing the side effects of treatment through hair loss, dry skin and all those sorts of things can be tough. And so and often we'll go from being head of a family or whatever and not being able to work, and we become anxious and depressed and so forth. And so this is where tonight may be able to give you some valuable tips. I'll go through the product pack at the end of the evening, so I hope you all have a really relaxing and fun and informative session tonight with Jeremy. So I'm going to introduce Jeremy. Now, I first met Jeremy at a conference a couple of years ago, and we had a good chat. And Jeremy's gone through prostate cancer. Jeremy's gone through a lot of things, actually. He's, I'd call, a prolific writer, and I'm really interested to hear how he benefits from writing and those sorts of things, and how he's motivated to write, especially around the material he'll cover. So Jeremy's been an airline pilot, and at the highest level too. So when you're captaining some of those, those large aircrafts, is massive responsibility. And of course, he's been there and experienced all those sorts of things and everything that comes with that. Whereas now he's in a different place, and so he's going to be talking, to us about that tonight. And at the end, there'll be one or two takeaways that he'll be providing to us that we may be able to add value to our lives from his experiences. So, Jeremy, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm really looking forward to what you have to say. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, gents. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk about my aviation career and the ups and downs through it, and some of the other things that happened to me. I've actually had melanoma as well as prostate cancer, so we'll talk about that. And then towards the end, as Paul mentioned, I lost my job through COVID, so we'll get to the aftermath of that and where it's put me now. But anyway, so we'll go back to the beginning. And I always like to tell people what motivated me in the beginning to become a pilot. And it was actually sitting and listening to the moon landing in 1969. And I decided I wanted to be an astronaut. And of course, I think I was 10 years old, and I had no idea that being a Kiwi meant I couldn't be an astronaut. But so the next best thing, obviously, after that was pilot, and that's how I ended up becoming a pilot eventually. But a little story about what motivates you. I do a bit of speaking for different groups, and a couple of years ago I made a speech to a bunch of endoscopic surgeons in Wellington. Endoscopy is basically, a lot of the things they do is colonoscopies, so they're sticking tubes up your bums and checking for bowel cancer and that sort of thing. So I'm making this speech to these guys, and I said, I was inspired by the moon landing. What inspired you to want to stick tubes up people's bums? I'll tell you what, that was at the beginning of the speech. It was a 25-minute speech. It was death by public speaking after that. They just stared at me for the rest of the meeting. No sense of humour at all. But anyway, moving on. So when I wanted to be a pilot, so I applied to the Kiwi Air Force for pilot training, and they offered me navigator. So I thought I'd do that first and then become a pilot later. And it wasn't so bad. Being 18, by the time I was 19, I was checked out as a navigator on P3 Orions and flying around the world with a crew, having a good time. And one of the things you guys may well know is that the P3 Orions were the search and rescue aeroplane for New Zealand. And I happened to be on standby at the age of 20 to do search and rescue on the 28th of November, 1979. I don't know if that date rings a bell. Yeah. But so I was the navigator, and when we were sent down to Antarctica to search for the Air New Zealand DC-10 at 20 years of age, which was a bit of a shock to the system. And we all know the outcome of that. All you guys are old enough to know and have listened to all the outcomes. But one of the things that came out of it was that that Justice McMahon accused Air New Zealand of an orchestrated litany of lies. And he was right. Which leads me to my next story. I actually was brought up to believe that the truth is the best way, you see. But these days, politicians and businesses seem to use lies as a tool almost. But I've got a little story about how the truth was reinforced for me. About 15 years ago, I had my brother-in-law and his wife come and stay, and we decided to go into Auckland City for a few drinks with another bunch of mates of mine. And we left the girls at home, and we said we'd be home at 10 o'clock. Well, at 10 o'clock, things were going really well in town, and we didn't want to go home. So we sort of said, well, what are we going to do about this? And someone piped up and said, give them a call. And I said, well, what am I going to say? They said, what about the truth? And I said, oh, everyone was looking a bit shocked at this concept. And I said, it's a novel concept, the truth, but we'll give it a go. But anyway, so we rung the girls and said, we're having a really good time. We're on a roll. Do you mind if we stay in here a few more hours? And the girls were really happy about it. So they just wanted to know. So it reinforced to me how good the truth is. But anyway, getting back to my airline career. So while I was a navigator in the Air Force, I decided to pay for a commercial license up at the North Shore Aero Club. And I did that. And then I left the Air Force in 1981 and went across to Australia to get my Australian licenses with the plan of looking for a job in Australia. And just excuse me while I turn my notes over here. So I did all that, but I couldn't get a flying job in Australia. And the next thing that was available was Papua New Guinea. When I'd left home, my old man said to me, I don't care where you get a job as long as it's not Papua New Guinea. So the next thing you know, I'm calling him to say I'm flying in Papua New Guinea. Well, for a young bloke, that was the best flying you could ever do. It was so exciting in the mountains, one-way airstrips. It was just really awesome flying, but it was also very dangerous. And I could see why Dad was really quite concerned, because while I was up there, 2.5 years I was there were 11 fatalities in the company. So a company of 60 pilots. Wow. So that, there was a bit of a turnaround there, or a turnover, should I say. I had a couple of close calls. There was one where I saw a tree go past the wing and cloud, and that was just lucky that I didn't hit it. So there's a lot of skill involved in surviving up there, but there's also a little bit of luck as well. Well, much to Dad's relief, I got into Qantas in 1984, and I went on to the 747 as a second officer, which is basically the third pilot. That was at the age of 25. At the age of 27, I was a 747 first officer. And then at the age of 28, they made me a simulator instructor. And at the age of 30, I started my captain training on the 747, which was generally probably 15 years earlier than you would normally do it. A lot of hard work and a little bit of luck being in the right place at the right time. But becoming a captain on a 747 for a company like Qantas is like a major deal, because you're talking about a $400 million aeroplane and 400 passengers. So they can't afford anything to go wrong. They can't afford to have a crash or lose any passengers. So they give you this 6 months of where they just stress you out the whole time. And it's like the aviation version of becoming a Navy SEAL, I guess. But so they put you under all this pressure and see how you react. And in the end, I got through. So just after turning 31, I was a 747 captain, which was pretty cool at the time. Very exciting. So once you're a captain of an operation like that, the captain's basically the CEO of the operation. And in these days, when I was in the A380, you'd have $1 million budget every time you went for a fly. In terms of that, it would cost $1 million for the flight, for the fuel and all the other costs. So one of the things they paid us for was our ability to make the whole thing really efficient. And so a good captain would always pay for their wages twice over in a year. And I guess that's why they paid us so well in the end. But I guess, the job, you can ask about this later if it confuses you, but the main job a pilot does is manage energy. And the second job that a pilot does is manage risk. So you've got to be really good at both of those things. Experienced pilots can smell risk from a mile off. You just know it's coming. Don't ask me how, but you do. But soon after I became a captain at Qantas, there was a downturn, and we're talking about the early 90s now. There was a downturn in the States, which then transferred across to Australia about 8 months later, and no one was flying around in aeroplanes, and us pilots were just sitting around in the crew room making paper aeroplanes and waiting to go flying and things like that. So I decided to do something about it, and I found out that Japan Airlines was offering captain jobs on the 747. So I spent a few months getting that organised. That led to a job and 8 months of training in Tokyo. They spent 8 months to somehow turn us into Japanese captains. I'm not quite sure what the difference was, but they spent 8 months doing it. And then when I checked out, they sent me to be based in Anchorage in Alaska, which, if you haven't been there, is one of the world's most amazing places. And we would pick up the Japanese would fly the 747 freighters into Anchorage, and then we'd pick them up there and fly them down into the USA or across the North Pole to Europe. Great place to be, Anchorage. And, we got really good at skiing and saw lots of bears and things. It's a pretty awesome place. If you've ever heard of anyone talk about the Alaska cruises that are available, they're really worth doing. Pretty amazing country. So eventually I had to go back to Qantas because they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, come back or find alternative employment. So I chose to go back to Qantas. And I guess what did we do? We had a few things happen. We had 9/11. 9/11 was, you would all remember this, that took all the fun out of aviation. There was no more romance left after that. It was just a job, I guess, a well-paying job, but it was just a job. So I continued doing that for a while. And in 2005, I had a mole in the middle of my back that I discovered in the mirror. And I took it to my doctor, who misdiagnosed it and just tried to burn it off with his nitrogen gun. And about a month later, that mole came back, and I ended up going to a skin specialist, and they did a biopsy and found it was melanoma. Fortunately for me, it turns out it hadn't gone anywhere other than on the surface. But as a result of having melanoma and being quite keen on jet skis at the time, I got a bee in my bonnet and decided to raise some awareness of skin cancer in New Zealand and ride a jet ski around New Zealand. So a mate of mine and myself did that in 2006. Some people remember seeing it on TV. It took us 23 days. It was very successful. We made it, obviously. Scared the crap out of myself a few days in the really rough water, 8-metre waves in places, and generally got beaten up. What would I have been, 2006? Or late 40s. Generally got my body beaten up by that 23-day exercise. So the end result was a lot of good coverage for skin cancer and a really sore butt. I'll just turn this over. So I became quite famous in Qantas because of that around the New Zealand effort. And I remember I was flying along one day over India, and the first officer was talking about that jet ski event around New Zealand, and he said to me, "What are you going to do next for an adventure?" And I went, "Nothing." That nearly killed me. And he was one of these guys with an imagination, and he said to me, "Oh, why don't you ride a jet ski from London to Sydney?" And I said, "You're an idiot. Who would do that?" And he got out his atlas and he showed me. He said, "Go down through here, and you go over here, and you go down here, and you go there." Yeah, he said, "It'd only take about 4 months. You should give it a go." And I just said, "You're dreaming." Well, within a couple of weeks, I was starting to plan it. Couldn't resist the challenge. Mainly the challenge, I guess, in the first place, was to see if I could get the whole thing to the start line, because it's a pretty big undertaking. It's a sort of $1 million operation. And you needed all sorts of sponsors, and so we were going to do that. Well, we did do that for. We got a whole lot of cancer partners. A lot of children's cancer outfits got on board, and we visited a few of them through Europe. But anyway, so it took me 3 years to get that to the start line in London, and so 3 years of organisation and about a month to turn completely to shit. We nearly got killed by lightning. They got the jet skis stolen in Bulgaria. We got locked up 3 times, arrested and locked up 3 times. Struggled to find fuel wherever we went. And the end result of that after a month was getting plucked out of the Mediterranean by a Greek Air Force helicopter in a storm after having covered 6,000 kilometres. They took us to Santorini and interviewed us for a couple of days, and then they set us free. Now, because this was such a big deal, it had been on TV all over the world, and we had major sponsors and lots of people following us. That the failure of that was really hard for me to take. It was the first big failure of my life, and so I went from Santorini to the south of France, and all I had was a pair of jet ski boots, a pair of jet ski shorts, a t-shirt, and I bought a backpack. And I started to walk the Camino de Santiago just to try and sort my head out for a week. I didn't mention that I wrote a book about the ride around New Zealand. After the London to Sydney failed attempt, people were saying, "Why don't you write a book about that?" And I said, "No, it's not possible to write about something that was such a failure when my writing style is so upbeat." So I never did until recently. One of the things about that failure that I learned was that when you've got something that's going for 4 months and you're asking people to volunteer, it's really hard to find good people who can give up 4 months of their time. And consequently, I'm not blaming them because it's as much my fault as anyone else's. But we had some pretty ordinary people on the team. We had money stolen off us by some of the team members. They never kept up with us. The ground crew never kept up with us. We were always waiting for them on the jet skis. But one of the guys that I'd signed up as one of the riders, he came to me once when I was in Frankfurt when I was flying, and his name was Ivan. And he had some pretty good qualities, or so it seemed. He was a Croatian guy. He was a Croatian kickboxing champion. So I thought he'd be good for security. He was a jet ski mechanic, so I thought he could fix the jet skis. And he also held the world record for the longest jet ski ride in a day, 1,650 kilometres. He'd ridden it in 24 hours on his jet ski. So I thought, well, this guy's he's got to be a good team member. But it turned out he wasn't, because he always thought that he was right. And it's never... When safety is an issue with an operation like that, you can't have people who think they're right all the time. You know, people need to listen and at least discuss and come up with a good solution. But he was always off on his own, this guy, so it was hard work. And he never shut up about this 24-hour jet ski world record. But anyway, after we got plucked out of the water in Greece, he decided he would try and bribe me, which is kind of a Croatian thing to do, to be honest, but for 10,000 euros, or he would make up all sorts of rubbish about the event. And I called his bluff on it, so he never did. But when I got back to New Zealand, another guy that I knew said, I told him the story about Ivan, and he said, well, why don't you take his world record off him, his 24-hour world record, and shut him up? So in 2011, I did. And I'm not so proud of the fact that I did it for revenge, but I made it useful because I did it for cancer awareness again. And I extended his 24-hour jet ski record from 1,650 kilometres to 2,287 kilometres in 24 hours. So well and truly thrashed him, and never heard any more from him. That's actually still the current world record, and it's been the world record for 12 years now. There's no one mad enough to have a go at it. After that, I decided to run an annual jet ski event to raise funds for the Melanoma Foundation. And how I did it was I planned a week-long event where people who own jet skis would sign up and get guided along the coast of New Zealand by me, and they had to raise $2,000 to enter, and then there was a contest to see who could raise more money. We had auctions. We had, every night we stayed in a different town, in a different hotel, and had fundraising events and things like that. It was a lot of fun running that and being part of it, and everyone loved it. And over the 6 years that I ran that event, we raised $500,000 for the Melanoma Foundation initially, and then for the Prostate Foundation afterwards. And the prostate thing, in 2018, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I was lucky again because I'm not sure if any of you are prostate sufferers, but my blood test was normal for prostate. My PSA was normal, but luckily for me, I had a doctor who enjoyed sticking his finger up men's bottoms, and he used to insist on doing that every time. And he discovered the cancer by feel. So a month later, I had a radical prostatectomy, and fortunately, it hadn't spread outside the prostate. So apart from the minor side effects of the operation, I'm free of it, which is also I'm very grateful for. So I continued on flying. Towards the end of my career, I was on the A380, the big double-decker Airbus A380, and having a good life, pretty much. And then along came COVID. And at first, this didn't seem like a problem, but then the company, they cancelled all our flights and stopped paying us. Unlike Air New Zealand, who kept paying their pilots, Qantas stopped paying us. And offered us a retirement payout sum, which was not great, but I decided at my age I should take it. So I took the money and started playing golf. That kept me entertained for about 4 months until I ran out of balls and got bored with it because I got down to a handicap of 18 and couldn't get any lower. And then I started thinking about, how I missed the job. When you're a captain of a big airliner like that, it kind of, you don't know it at the time, but when you stop doing it, you realise how much it defined you. So you're proud of what you were. Your partner liked to describe the fact that they went out with the captain, and you take your partner on trips, and they'd be in first class, and they'd take photos of their business class or their first class boarding passes and send them to their friends. So it kind of being a captain like that defined me. And now that I wasn't one, I kind of struggled with it a bit. So I started applying for flying jobs to try and get back into it once aviation picked up again, and discovered that they weren't interested in anyone my age, even though I had all the experience. So I must have applied for 100 different jobs in the aviation world, and I got one interview, but most of them didn't interview. Well, everyone else didn't interview me. A lot of them didn't even reply. A lot of them sent out the standard letters saying, "Oh, you're very highly qualified, but we've got better people available," which basically means you're too old, but they're not allowed to say that. So you can imagine now I'm starting to get a little bit depressed about my life. And I was just starting to feel a little bit rejected and not feeling good about myself. So that was when I decided I really like writing. So I wrote the book about the London to Sydney thing. And then I wrote another book about an imaginary pilot who goes around the world and gets himself into strife everywhere. He's a bit of a bad bugger, but he's not a true character, but he's a combination of a lot of the guys that I used to fly with. Anyway, I enjoyed writing those, and then someone said, "You should write a book about your aviation career." And I said, "Oh, do you reckon who would be interested in that?" Well, I ended up writing it for this particular guy, and that's actually sold more copies than any of my other books put together. Then I wrote another one about the bad pilot. So all these books were, helping me stay above the depression line. Basically, I was on antidepressants, but kind of a mild dose. Still unable to get work, but the writing was keeping me up there. Eventually, I was writing for the Sydney Morning Herald a few articles on aviation, and eventually an Australian literary agent contacted me and said, "How about writing a book?" And he talked me into writing a book which is going to be published by Pan Macmillan in June, called The Secret Life of Flying. And that's going to, they're very excited about it, and so am I, of course. But um, that was good for me at the time. That made me feel a little bit better about myself. But I was still just bouncing along just above the depression line, knowing that I really wasn't that happy. And then I split up with my partner of 3 years. Now, as my doctor said to me, normally splitting up with a partner wouldn't do this to you, but because you've had the loss of job and everyone rejecting you and all that sort of thing, he says it's all too much for you. And because as a result of my partner going nasty on me during the breakup, I ended up in severe depression. And I don't know if anyone of you has been in severe depression, but it's a place you don't want to be. It's nasty. It's like being in the bottom of a black hole, and it's really hard to even see a future for yourself. And probably, I have to be honest, if it wasn't for my kids, I probably wouldn't be here now. It was just I didn't do anything bad because of my kids. I didn't want to do it to them, but that's how bad I got. I was grateful for the friends who stuck with me. But in the end, I was sitting in this deep hole and every day and just going, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be alive. And I thought, I've got to get out of here. So I figured I was doing a lot of exercise. That was the one thing I was doing that was probably keeping me from getting any worse. But I was doing a lot of exercise. So I decided I need to set myself a really big goal and aim for it. I needed to inspire myself. So I thought, okay, what I want to do is I want to come out of depression and I want to end up being a better man than when I went in. So a better man than before I even lost my flying job. So I started reading all these self-help books and getting inspired and just learning lots of really good things to sort of slowly get myself out of depression. And what happened was that, one day you'd be feeling better and then the next day you'd slip back a little bit and it took forever, but I was actually slowly making progress, even though you don't really think so at the time. Yeah, but I was reading lots of books with themes like loving yourself. So, just loving yourself, loving everybody. And if you love the world, the love gets reflected back. And I noticed that worked really well. If you go out and just give as much love as you can to people, you'll find that it'll come back at you with their smiles and the way they react. And I'd be riding along on my bike and I'd see an old person walking along the side of the road and I'd give them a wave and say hello. And then they obviously hadn't had any connection for that day. And all of a sudden they had this big beaming smile on their face. And it was so rewarding to see the results of just giving love. And I also started meditating. Now, I've been doing that now for about 4 months and I'm still not even actually sure that I'm doing it properly, but it sure feels good to do it, and I do look forward to it. I think my brain's too active for it. I seem to let my thoughts overtake my brain when it comes to meditating, but I still do it. But the two main lessons that I learned, and I'm going to give these to you slowly because these were the most important things that I learned. The first one is not to live in the past. So what I was doing was I was beating myself up over all the mistakes I'd made. And I kept asking myself, what if I did that? What if I had done this? What if you can't do that. The reason you can't live in the past is because you can't change the past. So if you're thinking those thoughts, if you're punishing yourself, It's really unhealthy. So that was one of the things that I learned. So living in the past is something that you cannot do. And there's an old Chinese philosopher called Lao Tzu. I'm not even sure if he actually existed, but they quote him anyway. And he says, if you're in depression, you're living in the past. If you're in anxiety, you're living in the future. And if you're in peace, you're living in the present. And that's really correct, because if you think about it, if you're right now in the present, it's quite peaceful. It's only when you think about the awful past or you worry about the future that life gets really tough. So living in the present moment is the one lesson that I learned. And the other lesson I learned, which I have done, is to forgive people. So if you hold a grudge or anyone's wronged you, it's holding a grudge is like drinking a cup of poison and hoping that your enemies die. All it does is eat away at you, and they don't even know you've done it. So I decided, okay, I'm going to think through all the people that have done me wrong, that I've sort of in the back of my mind I'm grumpy about, and I forgave them all. And you would not believe how much happier that made me ever since, not having a grudge against anyone. And even now, when someone annoys me or sort of disappoints me, I might be a little bit annoyed at the time, but by the next day, they're forgiven. And it sure does make you feel better. And the other thing about forgiving is you've got to forgive yourself too. So you've got to forgive yourself for all the things you feel bad about in the past, because again, that's the past. And if you're not forgiving yourself for your past that you can't change, then you're still living in the past. And we've just discussed that in the first point. So those are my 2 points. Don't live in the past, and forgive everyone, and forgive yourself. And that's about it, really. I did have some good news as a result of giving love to the universe. I had some good news recently where I, as a joke, about a year ago, I applied to Air New Zealand for pilot training. Now, I've just turned 65 about a week ago. And I did their initial application process and didn't hear from them for 10 months. About a month ago, a girl gives me a ring, and she said, would you like to come in for your final 2 days of interviews and simulator check? I went, you're joking, aren't you? I'm nearly 65. And she went, no, we're serious. And I nearly didn't go because I just thought they were having a joke. But I thought, okay, well, if I don't go, I'm not going to live with myself. So I went and worked really hard at it. And on the following Monday, they rang up and said, you've got a job. So I've got a job as an Air New Zealand pilot. I won't be starting for the second half, but I'm going to be the oldest pilot they ever employed by about 15 years. So that's
What will
the
you be
universe.
flying?
I'll be a co-pilot on the A320 doing domestic and Tasman. But
Nice.
you know what? That will make me happy.
Yeah.
So
and is that for? Oh, that's Air New Zealand. You're saying, hey? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's made me feel a lot better too. So it's going to make me feel really useful to have that job. And
see, the universe has just paid you. The universe has just paid you back, didn't it?
It's paid me back for all the love that I'm giving to the universe and to everybody. I'm getting love back.
There you go.
Yeah,
it's a deal.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my story. So I'm open for questions from anyone.
Yeah, please. Anyone got any questions? Remember to unmute yourself and just fire away.
Any comment on the plane that dropped out of the sky coming across from Aussie?
No, not really, because I haven't really seen a lot of it. I don't watch the news anymore. That's another thing I've done to keep myself out of depression. Not watching the news in this country is actually quite relaxing. But I did read a little bit about it, but it's something you really can't comment on until you see the results
Yeah.
of the voice recorders and the flight recorders. It could be anything. It could be turbulence. It could be some electronic problem. But as per usual, I see from reading about it that everyone on the flight is exaggerating that they nearly died and all this sort of thing. But
Yeah.
that's the way people are.
Just
Jeremy, I was
wondering,
just going to ask you a question with regard to that. It sounded like that even when you're in depression, somehow you were able to see you were still able to see yourself, if you know what I mean. You were able to still recognise, if you like, that you were in that place and that you wanted to get out of it, even though it felt like you were in it. Would that be right?
Oh yeah, well it's hard not to recognise it when you're in it because
Right.
you just feel intensely sad and have no hope. And also, of course, my doctor also agreed with me and put up my antidepressants quite a lot. So yeah, it's not hard to recognise when you're in it, I can tell you.
Okay.
in the ongoing side effects, physically, sexually, emotionally, in any side effects that you had from prostate cancer?
Oh, from prostate. Well, actually, interesting you should ask that because one of the reasons that I split up with my partner was that I had quite a bad leaking problem, and I was a bit overweight, and it made the sexual side of it quite not ideal for her. One of the things that I did when we split up was to go to the gym, and I also had a really sore lower back, which was quite debilitating. I went to the gym and I went to a personal trainer, and he put me through a core and back strength routine. And within 3 weeks, the leak had stopped and the sore back had gone. So it was being overweight and having a weak core that caused those problems. So those two have been fixed. Other than that, I'm fully operational.
Right. So do you
Thank you.
still exercise, Jeremy?
Every day,
Okay,
at least an
every
hour and
day.
a half. At least an hour and a half a day. It's
Okay.
it's
Does
probably
is that like walking or gymming or what form?
yeah, it's my highest priority. I'll do a big weight session every 3 days. I go
Right.
for 2 hour walks carrying 20 kilogram weight belts on my shoulders, and ride a bike some days. I sort of move it around a bit, what I do, but I do something fairly intense every day, and then when I get completely worn out, I'll have a day off, but usually not no more than 1 day off a week.
Right. Oh, that's
Just
good.
a question as well. It's, you said don't live in the past. That's your first one. What's the second? What was your second one that you actually said there? The two questions at the end.
Well, forgive everyone who's ever done anything bad to you, and forgive yourself for everything you've done in your life that you weren't proud of.
Oh yeah, that's right. It wasn't fast enough in writing it down.
That's all right. Yeah, you'll be
So
surprised.
how did you forgive them? Like, was that necessarily, not all of them would have been face to face with some of them, or how did you do that?
I did it in my mind.
Okay.
I just decided, thought about each person and decided that, holding on to the grudge wasn't worth it. I mentally forgave them. There was one guy I tried to apologise to directly who wasn't interested, so he showed his true colours, but I still forgave him. He just didn't respond, that's all.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to actually go and physically find people to forgive them. You just do it in your head.
I think that's an incredible thing to do. Yeah.
Try it.
With, with yeah. Look, I am. I've got that noted down. um, I just coming back to your meditating. Now, in New Plymouth, here, we for our men's groups, meditation classes every 2 weeks. But I ended up actually going on a mindfulness course over a weekend, and I found that very useful. And the guy that we have on Look Good Feel Better now about every 4 months, he he takes that class, and it's very, very down to earth, very practical. But he kind of trains on that. So there's people out there, Jeremy, that are quite good in that area. So it's a name I could pass on to you anyway that might be useful. He's got a few podcasts and things.
Yeah, I think I do need to go and they call it practicing meditation and I'm definitely practicing because I'm not there yet. But I think it would be helpful to actually do a live instructional course on it or an online one. You can download them online where you can follow them through as well. So yes, that should be on my list. Mm.
Yeah. But I think that couples really well with that forgiveness thing. That the meditation component of it allows you to, when you get in a situation of stress or anxiety or that sort of thing, you can actually go quite quickly into a relaxed state to help overcome some of that kind of stuff. Because
Sure.
I mean, I'm not sure if you still have your blood tests and those sorts of things, but everyone has these anxieties prior to tests and prior to results and all of those sorts of things. And it's a great tool for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Is there any other questions, guys? No?
A comment more than anything else.
Sure.
What you've told us, Jeremy, gives me an outline or a skeleton, if you like, of where to go next and how to incorporate it all. So, yeah, I suppose a skeleton would probably be the best thought of it, in that these are things that are possible, but you don't worry about them because you think they're impossible until what you've said tonight.
Oh yes, definitely. Like I had a whole bunch of books that I read, and every book that I read recommended the next one. And one of them was Tony Robbins's "Awaken the Giant Within." There's some stuff in there that's just amazing. I wish I had read that book 20 years ago about how to just change the way you see things, the way you look at things, change your values, recognize what values are more important, and perhaps that you might have been focusing on the wrong ones. So there's a lot of good stuff out there if you just look for it.
Tony Robbins is very good. Even his older material is still very relevant.
Totally.
Yeah. Right. All right. I'm going to close off this section now, unless there's anything else anyone wants to ask. And thank Jeremy very, very much for his insight. And also, Jeremy, I it's tough going through some of these situations, but how cool you've got this job. I congratulate you and wish you all the best. It's going to be quite something getting back in and being part of the workforce again and so forth. And I'm sure you'll have a spring in your step.
Oh, totally. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you all, gentlemen. So all the best.